welcome. I think my presentation lends itself very nicely to the previous one. Mine is entitled Roller Coasters, Psychological Contracts of Transformational Leaders. And I want to thank you for this opportunity. I'm very passionate about leadership, and I'm here to share a few ideas that might lend itself to the previous, because I'm looking at a model that I've been involved in developing over years and for the workplace to improve employee experiences. So this just might fit in very nicely. I've organized my materials by connecting concepts for better outcomes that I've personally experienced as an employee. I've used the workplace to serve as my living laboratory. So by researching literature, it provides a blueprint for me to help me see the big picture. So in setting my foundation, you got to remember to click on. Setting my foundation, my rationale was the reason for the study is to identify the impact of internal cooperation and communication in terms of establishing recruitment criteria for an organization and to meet the needs of the operation. So one slight difference is that in many organizations, it's usually looked on as the employee's responsibility for being included and belonging and different feelings. I'm looking at it from the organizational managerial side. I think the organization owes it to the employees to provide this foundation to encourage them. My objectives were to analyze specific best practices within an organization in terms of setting standards for new incoming employees to fit into the company culture. Those first few days, weeks, months, even first year are so critical to development. And the methodology that I plan on using is case studies, which I have some experience to share, secondary data analysis, which I'm doing a lot of reading through the literature, and to have some interviews. So the talking points for this presentation are transformational leadership, psychological contracts, collective impact, and learning environment. And these individual concepts, what my idea is to put them all together to create a new model that gives a lot of synergy that could go through the organization, which everyone wins when we do that. So let's begin by talking about transformational leadership. It's the preferred style that I think most represents my type of leadership, my work. And I think it's the most advantageous to employees or people within the organization. So when I'm talking about the transformational leaders, I'm thinking of how it promotes adaptation, growth, and helping others to do the same. And over the last 45 years, I've worked in a job. I'm an employee, and I thrive, and I have thriven for so many years. So I've described this as riding a roller coaster, but the roller coaster is not fear and screaming. The roller coaster is excitement and happiness and being engaged and excited for what the next turn is. And so for hearing the presentation earlier today about talent and where we're going, we could be looking at a downturn in available employees. This could be something that really helps jumpstart organizations to take some serious look at how do they create this environment beyond inclusion, but engagement, and do it in a way that really does excite people to do better work. So as employees stay on track, their journey usually goes through what we call change management. And change management is a psychologically usually fearful, because people are fear of change, but change can be good or bad, right? And it depends on your perspective. If the organization creates a culture where they're looking at collectively gathering and impacting, while everyone is continuously thriving on the investment of them developing learning environments that are continuous. See, I think there's too many silos that get started and then people walk away. And so if you don't have everyone top down, bottom up, if everyone's not on the same page, people fall out and then it becomes like voluntary and optional. I think we need to look at more of the building the relationships. And let me see here, building relationships, increasing our emotional intelligence, change management for sure, personal development through educational training, and having a plan with strategy and taking action. People are attracted to action. Everyone wants to participate. So when I think about organizational culture, I'm thinking about the internal values and behaviors. So do you remember your first day? You know, first day at work, a first day anywhere, or your first 10th job? I mean, every time you change jobs, it's the first day, right? It could be very stressful. You're feeling that you don't know anyone. Are you going to be able to do everything right? How are you going to connect with people? You know, are you going to be introduced to not just your team, but others in the organization? So the psychological benefits of belonging and inclusion are already chemicals in our brain, right? We're already wired to start feeling this way. And when you don't feel like you belong, it's hard to perform at your full capacity, right? You've got so many conflicting messages running through your brains. So I feel like there's what I've seen over my 45 years of being an employee, there tends to be kind of two different models. There's the, what I call no touch model, where you start a new job, you really feel kind of isolated, you're stressed, you're doubting what you're doing, who to talk to. You really just kind of walking around with your hands out, trying to figure out who to trust, who to listen to. You've read all the handbooks and gone through the orientation, but it doesn't really address a lot of the culture, right? What their beliefs are, how things, who should you be talking to or not talking to, right? That can be very stressful. And then there's the second side, complete opposite, which is the high touch model, which is you're assigned a buddy, maybe a team member that stays with you the whole day or the whole month. Your supervisor practices one-on-one communication with you daily, not when it's time for an evaluation, but daily you are teaming together to create community, that you're recognized as a member and encouraged to share ideas. This is where a lot of silence comes in, fear from employees. So when you have this hands-on, high-touch kind of environment, there's more enthusiasm. There's good feelings that you're in the right place. You're really feeling supported from day one. Let's see. So as we think of change management, I want to share just two quick case studies that I did in talking with the first one. The case study is 3 new employees that got hired. And I'm speaking personally because I did this. So I guess I'm studying myself, and my experience is that after having not good experiences with staff, knowing that I wanted to change the culture, at least within my office, because I felt that the organization as a whole needed to change. So I wanted to start like a little incubator, right? I'm going to start with myself. So I partnered with human resources because I was going to be asking for exceptions, changing the standard model of who gets hired for a position. And it took some time, but it was well invested. So I hired 3 new people, and the staff is only 4. So 3 new people is a big jump of faith. And today, these 3 people, 5 years later, are probably the best superstars I've ever experienced in my 45 years of working in the organization. So I feel like there's some really good information that I've discovered and want to share with other organizations to improve not only the outcome of the unit, but the outcome of the people, the managers, and as well as the whole organization. So these folks are self-motivated. They've become kind of like change agents. They're now talking with other employees across from them, up above them, below them, because they've achieved the highest productivity, their high job satisfaction, and retention. I mean, they have no intention of leaving, which is really amazing because most people start a job, they work a year or 2, they feel like they've exceeded whatever they're about to learn. So I think there's something here for organizations to start paying attention to. A second case study I did was with a friend who's a professional artist. She was looking for a job and her friend offered her a job to be the artist at the company. She thought, great, she's got all excited, went for her first day of work. Disaster. Her supervisor wasn't there to welcome her. There wasn't a handbook telling her what to do. She felt that her friend is the owner of the company, that she had nothing to worry about. But as it turned out, the husband actually runs the company and is very controlling. So she didn't have a voice. She lives in fear that she's not meeting their expectations because no one talks to her about. So this is one example of what I call the no touch. She's so discouraged. She's been there 8 months now and feels the fear that she can't leave her job because she needs the income. And especially during COVID, I think people are feeling a little bit more resistant on making changes in their job situation. But I think this situation is fairly common, that employees get started in an organization, and because so much of our values in what the company culture is, how does it really work? You can see the product, you can see things on the outside, but how do people feel on the inside? And when you think about how many hours you're going to spend working that job and the way that you're going to feel and the damage to your health when there's stress. So I feel, really sad for my friend. But when we think about change management, I'm proposing that we think of change as good. This is something good for us because it opens up growth. It's what we should be doing internally, just like taking a vitamin. For your good health, you should be changing. And I'm so appreciative because my first professor, Ann Gladys, she's the one that taught me about change management. And during the time that I was taking her course on change management and innovation, she introduced me to several models that provide a good framework for change. And it's amazing that each time we went through a model, I could apply this model to some type of project that I had done in my current job over the last several years. We looked at John Cotter's 8-step model, McKinsey's 7S model that looks at systems versus people, soft skills, Adger's change model with awareness, desire, knowledge, Kubler, even for grief, because people do feel senses of sadness, denial, anger, how to get through that. And then Lewin's unfreezing and then taking a new shape and then refreezing. All of these models are right there in the literature. And so I feel like this is an opportunity that if we put the right concepts together and we apply them to these models, we could have actually pretty positive workplaces for new employees to get started. So the term psychological contracts. What is that? Well, it's kind of the way we think, right? But what I was thinking about when I put that in there for my presentation is that I'm really thinking about how communication and what we're thinking happens between supervisors, managers, the human resources department, and staff. Like, how do we establish best practices for employee fulfillment so it contributes to the organizational culture in which the employees learn to respond to engagement, to brainstorming, visionary workshops, all kinds of other kinds of participatory activities in which organizations can achieve increasing their productivity, higher job satisfaction, and better retention. I think this is going to become a recurring theme, and especially as we begin to look at talent and if there's going to be a holdback on talent coming in, because I think some of the universities are already seeing a decrease in the number of students going on to college. So there's going to be some shifts going on. This next slide, when I'm talking about here with the management teams and their collaboration, which can transform their employees to improve the job satisfaction. When you're happy, for me, it's not even like going to work every day. I can't wait to get there. I'm so excited because what's new? What's going to be happening that day? And I create an environment for all the people that work for me, as well as indirectly. So my group is really more than probably 250 people, even though just in my internal office it's 4, but the group, because we partner, right? We collaborate, and that collaboration creates a lot more excitement. There's more thrill. Like, what are you guys doing? What are you talking about? How can we form these kinds of partnerships that get people really feeling opportunities to learn who other people are, what are their ideas, which then helps create more trust, right? And then you're building the trust up. And what does that do? That opens up more communication, because everything about the organization really does boil down to communication. So when employees stay on the track, their journey is very much more exciting with the psychological aspects of the contract and how the organizations create culture as a collective impact. Recently, I've seen collective impact, that word used. It's kind of a new buzzword, and it's primarily in the social kinds of groups where we have a lot of social services that struggle as individual businesses or companies. So my perspective on this was, when you have a large organization where I work, I know we have more than probably 40,000 employees. So when you're talking in these large groups, to me, collective impact really is similar to having a lot of the social services groups. And how does an organization really start fitting more closely and connecting to each other so they can leverage their tools? So you can only imagine, as a newcomer starting, what's going on psychologically before this person was hired, during the hiring process, during the onboarding process, and then being, released out almost like an ocean, right? A little fish into this big ocean for them to keep moving forward and maintaining their job satisfaction, right? Each step of the way, because that needle can sway either way. One day is good, not so good. So I feel that managers or the managerial teams within organizations have a responsibility to be connecting themselves, because when they're silos, then there's no bridges. Employees get stuck and they can't just jump over a bridge because they're not sure where they're jumping to. So I feel like the psychological contracts really do help us if we pay attention and we're intentional about working with our new employees and the continuing ones, we can make a difference. Straightforward, we can make a difference. And it's going to be through collaboration. This collective impact is an intentional way of working together, and it's shared information for the purpose of solving like complex problems. These are things where you unite 3 or 4 departments, and not because it's part of a product being built. I'm talking about the connection of the people, because when you get the synergy of the people, you've had these work groups before, even students in school, you know, when you're working with other classmates, sometimes there's this immediate synergy that starts to happen. You're attracted to somebody, they've said something about that's interesting to you, and all of a sudden you just have this, you're just closing the gap, just closing it. And I can assure you, as an employee, I've experienced the good, the bad, and the ugly over 45 years, these patterns of behaviors that lead to being satisfied. That's the goodness that I'm hoping to be able to share through my work for leadership in this degree program that is a new venture for me. So as we recognize the combination of transformational leadership for adapting and growth, and then the psychological contracts in which we can identify where the communication is coming, how people are feeling, like checking in all the time, and then to develop the positive impact along with continuous learning foundational work. I believe that employees are going to be successful, and I think they're going to stay with you. And that's been my experience that I've seen at my job. So when the roller coaster ride begins and the employees first meet their supervisors, these are what we've heard, like, you don't get a second chance at a first impression. I feel like the impression started long before the employee ever got to your department. So the organization needs to take a really strong look at internally what their managerial teams are doing, how are they cooperating, how is onboarding, is it transparent, is it showcasing the organizational culture, things that people really want to know. I mean, we got the paperwork and we can see the product, but how do we kind of live and work together in harmony so we do our best work and we feel like we're accomplishing something? The diversity of the team, we've heard now for years, is just an incredible asset to any team. It's what drew me to Alliant to come here for a PhD program, was the diversity of the student body as well as the faculty. It's outstanding, and I feel like I'm gaining from this. And I think the same thing happens in your workplace. The more diversity, the more opportunity you have. When employees are looking to leadership to make a difference, when you have a very diverse pool, you have a lot more opportunity for your brainstorming, for different solutions, especially if you're open-minded. I mean, everybody's got to be on board with this, because it is the better way of moving career paths across the departments, ensuring that employees can experience kind of internal, even short-term pilot projects, you know, fun things that come up, allowing people to build their inclusion, their growth, and their trust. Because when they're open to each other, over and over, you can point it out. If we did a little survey every time, a job satisfaction, I feel that the organization could really benefit from that, because that's how we learn. We learn from each other. So I hope that we'll get in this, start getting to consider this kind of direction more broadly across lots of companies. It's got to be intentional. It's got to be continuous. And the learning component cannot be optional. I feel like that's where so many large organizations fail. I've seen numerous new employees start their job, learn it, I don't know, 60 days, 90 days, get a really good, groove going. The end of the first year, they feel like they've learned their job, they know what to do, and now they're sitting back and they're starting to look at the retirement website. How many more years do they have to put in? As though that they're done. They got their job, they know how to do it, and they're ready to go. And even if they stay, I've had friends stay in the same position for 40 years and loving their job, because what they were doing is they were continuously improving their soft skills, learning conflict resolution, interviewing, switching out, doing job trading, right? Exchanging to get a different perspective, being on committees, right? Committee work is really a fascinating kind of effort that organizations can benefit from, and so do employees. So all types of learning strategies, from workshops to volunteer work, inside your office or outside in the community, all of that is lifelong learning. And the more that you keep adding to your knowledge base of skills, the more successful in feeling that you're making a contribution and you're in the right place. What's the best practices for our learning organizations? I've named a few, but I think that from my experience of watching employees, and thousands of them, by the way, is that when we focus on engagement, there's something magical. You might have to help the employees get together. You're going to have to formulate different kinds of projects for them to engage in. And even having the managerial team engaging is a very positive influence on new people. They're like, what? That's the manager, that's the director, that's the whatever title that they have. Everybody should be joining in, because everyone needs to trust across lines and to be able to communicate openly. So you'll see the satisfaction. People feel excited about it because they were chosen to participate. There's a much higher retention because people are counting on you to get that job done, because you do fit in some kind of a pathway, right? Some kind of blueprint that has one step in front of the other. The other benefit is that people come to work more often. Everyone probably, if you're working for these kinds of companies that don't have this kind of positive environment, you wake up that morning and Monday, you do not want to go to work. That's how my friend is, that second case study. She dreads acid dripping to go to work because she's just not engaged. She's not feeling welcome and included in their operation. So what about psychological contracts, right? Because they can be at the root of conflict. Personally, I see conflict as a good thing because it helps you grow, right? You can always learn something, because conflict usually comes from some misunderstanding. You heard something wrong, you saw something wrong, people said something, they didn't say something, they did a hand gesture, or they didn't give you eye contact. The list is so long. I think somebody could do a whole dissertation on just that idea, because we all have expectations and we think people should do something that they didn't do. And really, are we checking ourselves to ask, maybe those expectations were unrealistic? Do we really need to have everybody doing everything all the time? Or can we help each other out? Because I noticed that when you feel connected to somebody, you put that little extra effort to read between the lines or to jump over that little gap that was presented there. But when you don't feel like a community, you're not on the team, these start to happen. These kinds of situations start to happen, and they're just roadblocks. And they're constantly stopping the flow, the positive flow, the good feeling flow of how you should be spending your life. If you're going to work for 40 years, which, I know young people don't think they're going to work for 40 years, but, from my generation, you definitely were going to work either 20 or 30 years to get a gold watch or something like that. By the way, they don't give any more gold watches that I know of, so you can let that part go. But communication, verbal, nonverbal, it's really at the basis. So that's why I say continuous learning, right? Keep the conflict at a level where the conflict actually adds to the value. So the conflict isn't for the people. The conflict is about maybe the policy or the practice, something about that everyone can brainstorm, put some solutions together so you can move forward. Because when you do, the way you feel when you can, instead of, like come together, going together across the finish line is extremely powerful. You will feel very accomplished and proud of yourself. And it's a good skill to have, not only in the workplace, but everywhere in your life. This last slide is looking at these concepts that I think will improve organizational cultures, starting with the transformational leadership to psychological contracts, understanding where they are, acknowledging them, making sure that you're covering your bases of the communication, the collective impact of pulling people together for belonging, inclusion, and then the continuous learning environment. When you take away one of these, there's going to be a gap. But if you do the whole thing, A, B, C, D, do the whole project, I've seen tremendous value. And so in experiencing it myself, I'm really excited about, I feel people are the power. One of my slogans is always people before paper. And that just means that in my generation, paper was everywhere. And now, of course, we have the computers and everything's supposed to be on paper, but really put people first and engage them and include them. And you'll just see your environment change. And the future really counts on this, though. If you jump from job to job and you're constantly looking for growth, imagine if you found a company that already has this as part of their culture. You'd have this backbone supporting you, creating all of these new work clusters, creating new advancements. Like when we go to school, right? We talk about lifelong learning. Well, why not do it in your organization where you're getting paid, right? To spend your time. And this guy, when I saw this picture, it's like, okay, that's me. Okay, on my cell, I'm doing my email. I'm not watching the clock, so I don't know where that clock came from. But my findings are, as many had said before me, in fact, Dominica said, when you engage your employees, the feeling of inclusion triggers the job satisfaction. Productivity goes up. The higher you move up, the higher all the productivity moves up, and so does your reduction of the losing, the turnover. Turnover is so costly to organizations. And it's something that people don't talk about. But I'm glad to see our HR departments are beginning to change. They're starting to look at incorporating them into the leadership team so they understand the future of the organization. And they're looking at not only the things that they do anyway. So their long history in HR is handling the recruitment, onboarding, payroll, grievances, and then retirement as they go out. And I'm suggesting that the more they're involved, they're engaged, the managerial teams are all engaged with each other. When that connection is there, employees, staff, they get to run across very freely. It just opens up like a highway. So let's keep in mind that the talent market is probably reducing, and organizations, in order for them to compete, are encouraged to make changes. And to do that, if you have employees with high satisfaction, it's going to be a little bit easier to make those changes.